Kirsten Howe, thanks for coming on Just Build Wealth. We do one of the cool things I discovered was that you have an Elvis estate story. I really want to get to that, but I'm curious. Give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. I've been an attorney for many years, and I've been an estate planner for, I just recently figured it out, about 17 years. And I was business lawyer before that. I worked with small businesses. And I have a team. There are 9 of us in my law firm, and we're in Walnut Creek. We do only estate work, estates and trusts. We write estate plans. We administer estate plans. We do special needs planning. And we also do some planning for elderly disabled people who need to qualify for Medi-Cal.
Okay, really quick question there. You said only estate plans. Is there something that's separate that an estate planner might do?
No, I mean, if you're calling yourself an estate planner,
Okay,
that's what you
that's all
do. I was trying to say, I'm not a business lawyer. I'm not a criminal lawyer. I'm not a generalist.
Okay,
I only do what I do. Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Well, one of the things I discovered in research was that you have quite an interesting take on famous estates, and one of those is Elvis's estate. Can you give me the background about why it might have been unusual? Obviously, he was quite the figure.
Yes.
But yeah, bring me through it.
Sure. I always like to look at the celebrity estates because we can always learn something. And there's a couple of things we can learn from Elvis. First of all, so he died in 1977, which was a long time ago. The estate tax rules were very different in those days than they are right now. And I suspect he had a taxable estate. He probably had about a $5 million estate, something like that. He only had a will, which is not what we would recommend for somebody like him in California. We would have recommended that he have a trust and a will in order to avoid our lovely California probate process. But the big thing about Elvis's estate plan is that he left his estate ultimately to his daughter, Lisa Marie, who was 9 years old at the time. And it was held in trust for her benefit until she reached the age of 25, which, seems like a normal, reasonable age to a lot of parents. But it turned out that when she turned 25, she got about $100 million. And she was only 25. Mm-hmm. And she didn't hang on to it. It kind of sifted through her fingers. And, it's hard to know what a 9-year-old is going to be like. And I'm not casting any aspersions on Lisa Marie. She could have been just a typical normal 25-year-old, and that's a lot of money. So I think that they could have anticipated that it would end up being a lot of money because it's Elvis, and maybe they should have put some protections in for her.
So question there, you said his estate was $5 million, and then she inherited $100 million. Is that inflation working its way or?
No, that is a great question. What happened in the interim is the estate actually had very little. And what she inherited basically was Graceland. And in the interim, they turned Graceland into a money-making machine. It was his private residence. After he died, they turned it into a museum and all the things that went along with that. And they really made it worth a lot of money. So it was her mother, Priscilla, and her professional advisors who helped make that transformation.
It's interesting. And I have oh, hello.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's great. We had a cat just like that. Not joking. It looked exactly like this. That's very surreal. What's her name?
This is Patrick.
Hi, Patrick. Patrick the cat just joined us for the okay, well, this is what I'll do now that we're talking about home stuff. I read that you had some experience as a editor of the Hastings Law Journal. What is that, and are you using any of the skills now that you had back then?
Well, yeah, in fact I am. So I was the managing editor, which meant that I made sure the work got done and people did their jobs. I wasn't actually involved in the content. And so that is a great experience for someone who's running a business. It was like I was the one running, I was the COO of the of the company.
So what things did you have to operate being the COO?
Of the Hastings Law Journal?
Yeah.
Well, a lot of it, we had, I think we were doing 6 issues a year at that point. And so we've got to get our authors hitting their deadlines, and things have to be edited internally we have a staff of 2nd year and 3rd year students.
Yeah.
And everybody has to hit their deadlines, and we got to turn things around. We got to work with the printer, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that is kind of like running the business.
Yeah, it's just a lot of logistical stuff.
Oh, yeah, very interesting. I was going to mention, you were talking about how Elvis's estate, they had the property turned into a money-making machine. It reminded me of, I was reading this book about the Vanderbilts and how they turned the Breakers into like a working museum, even as the family was living there, right? Because the income tax, it just totally it decimated all of the Vanderbilt's wealth, but they still had the properties. So that's what that reminded me of.
Well, and they also do that like in England, where their income tax rates are very high, is my understanding. And they have all these old estates, but they don't have, the family no longer has the cash flow to support that estate. And so they've turned a lot of those places into basically museums, and the family's still living there. So you see that a lot in England too.
So, this is not a question that I'd anticipated, but it fascinates me. Usually when you hear a reference to someone being the editor of the law journal, it's because they're at a strata of their class of law school that is very high. And what I have always envisioned is that they end up writing a lot for the law journal, but you just changed my mind on that you are running an operation with that law journal. Is that a correct observation now?
Well, that was my 3rd year job. In order to join the law journal, you join as a 2nd year, at least our journal. You join as a 2nd year, and you either are invited because you have good grades or you won a writing competition. And I got on by winning the writing competition. And as a 2nd year, you are writing and editing. So I did write a piece that was published in my law journal. And then as a 3rd year, you become an editor, and you can be either the kind of editor who works with the author and develops the content, or like in my case, I was the one who cracked the whip over everybody.
Ryan, I didn't mean to hijack you there.
Oh no, next we're going to talk about the kinds of trusts, right? I've read about dynasty trusts, which I didn't. Sounds really cool. Sounds like political families and stuff like that. What are the different kinds of trusts?
There are kind of all kinds of trusts. You can do lots of different things. One big distinction is irrevocable versus revocable. Sure. So the revocable trust is one that we're probably all familiar with. That's the basic estate planning trust, meaning, it's taking the place of a will. So that's the kind that most people are familiar with, and most people will end up having. There are a lot of varieties of irrevocable trusts. You might use them for asset protection. You might use them to transfer property to your children or somebody else before you die, but you want to control what they do with it. So that's a variety of irrevocable trusts. And that could be a dynasty trust meaning a trust that's going to last for generations. In California, we can't really do that. We have to go outside of our jurisdiction. We can only make trusts that last about 96 years or something like that in California.
It sounds like such an arbitrary number of years.
It kind of is. It's a very old concept called a rule against perpetuities, which started back in, the mother country, England. And some states have completely done away with it. And most have not. In most states, your trust has to finish up in some number of generations.
Okay.
But people go to South Dakota, people go to Nevada for those kind of trusts that are of really long lasting.
Do those states have specific well, I guess their laws are different, and that makes it that so that they have different they treat trust differently, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean there's probably a financial reason for that. They want the trust companies to come and do business in their state, because you've got to have a trustee in that state in order to use their laws. And so a lot of the big trust companies are set up to be run out of South Dakota.
I see. So it's almost like an incentive to come here because, well, sorry, Nevada, there's not much else going on other than Vegas, and Delaware has.
And Delaware has cornered the market on the corporate stuff.
Corporate trust, right? And I also think about like the Panama Papers, or that's in that's in Panama. That's a kind of a different animal entirely, though.
Yeah, you can go if you want to have a real 100% asset protected, dark trust. You have to go offshore. We don't have that in the U.S., but you would go to someplace like Panama, the Caymans,
Bermuda,
yeah,
like that. Jersey. I was all in this this Panama Papers. I read this book and I'm like, I had no idea. It's a wild world out there.
Yeah, those are not my clients. Those are the ultra wealthy people who, they just want to stay under the
very
taxing
hidden
radar. And those are not my clients.
I want to talk about decanting a trust. I was reading about this is how, well, first I thought it was a wine term. Obviously, probably not. Maybe unless there's some wine in the trust. But the irrevocable trust is interesting. Or sorry, the decanting a trust I thought was interesting. Can you uncork that for us?
I absolutely can. And I think it's possible that the term came from wine. I don't know. I haven't studied the etymology of that. But what it basically means is that if you have a trust that is now irrevocable, meaning in theory it cannot be changed, but something isn't working quite right about it and it needs to be changed. In some cases, it's possible to decant that trust. In other words, sort of tip it over and dump its assets into another trust. And there's a procedure. Now, this is a relatively new thing in California. We have not had this until maybe 5 years ago. I'm not exactly sure on the date. And there's a procedure you have to go through in order to have a legitimate decanting of a trust. But it's a useful tool. It is a useful tool.
So effectively, it allows you to say well, you know what? We wanted to make this irrevocable. We wanted to make it rock solid, but things have changed. Some situation changed, and now we need to adjust it slightly. So we open it up, we pour it into the decanter, and then we put that in a new bottle. And then we say all right, this is now irrevocable.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And just as a little aside, oftentimes, even without decanting, it's possible to what we call modify an irrevocable trust. And there are statutes in the probate code that tell us how to do that. Sometimes you can do it just because everybody who's relevant agrees to do it. Oftentimes you have to go to court and convince a judge, we need to do this. But there are lots of ways to change a trust that is technically irrevocable.
Got it. Yeah, do you have a question? Oh, that was your question. Okay. Okay. I want to make sure I give him appropriate airtime.
We'll edit that part out.
Well, I also read on your website estate planning and elder law. What are the two differences? Are the same thing or totally different subjects? Walk me through that.
They're kind of overlapping. So strictly speaking, estate planning is, writing wills, trusts, powers of attorney, healthcare directors, that kind of thing. People who do elder law, could mean a variety of things. It could mean that they specialize in doing estate planning for elderly people. It could mean they also do conservatorships. It could mean that they, like I said a few minutes ago, they help elderly people qualify for Medi-Cal. There's lots of, and it also could mean that they do litigation, that they take on elder financial abuse cases or elder physical abuse cases or nursing home cases. All of that could be under the umbrella of elder law.
Okay, so it's really about protecting people in the higher age ranges, so because they might not be all there mentally. Is that why?
That could be it. That could be part of it.
Okay, is that popping up more and more?
Probably because we have more and more older people. You
Yeah.
know, we all know our population is aging up, and the baby boomers are now becoming seniors. So yeah, there's more of it, and I think there's just going to continue to be more of it.
Question about the what to ask an estate planning attorney if you once you started doing business with them, right? Like what can you expect if you start speaking to somebody, because some people out there, they might not have the network, right?
Sure.
What are like the introductory things?
Yeah, I think it's good to understand what they are recommending that you do. You really have to understand it. So you got to ask whatever questions you need in order to understand. I think you want to understand their process and have an understanding of how long it's going to take, how much it's going to cost you. You don't want to, I mean, like with most things, you don't want to step in and it's open-ended. I'm just going to get a bill every month until we're done, and I don't know how much it's going to cost. So it's okay to ask. It's okay to know that. The question that I get a lot from people who are being very conscientious is, and it's usually people who did an estate plan with another attorney and now they're coming to me because they want to update it. And they will ask, and I think it's a smart question, you know, how long are you or your law firm going to be in business? Because I don't want to have to go to another attorney when you retire. And for, you know, for people, that's important, because every time you go to a new attorney, you kind of have to start over.
Yeah.
And it costs a lot of money to start over. So I think that's a good question.
It's almost like, it sounds like this is the only way I could explain it myself, is if you have to switch dentists, right? You still got to give them all the medical documents. They need to catch up on what's going on, right? There's an onboarding process. So it's a fair question, I guess, and being prepared for that. And we've spoken with a lot of other professionals, and it's like, okay, a lot of times they're asked, what's your succession plan? And so, because that's a really
the same
big
question.
thing.
Yeah.
Making
What is
sure
your
that there's like
succession
a next steps in there.
Right. Yeah. It's a good question. Yeah.
So let's shift a little bit to kind of the business of being an estate planning attorney. One of the things that differentiates you, Kirsten, from others is, you know, I'll scroll through a LinkedIn feed and I'll see you doing a live webinar, a live interview of something like that. And, you know, it sounds like you've grown over the years to the size you are. How do you think about kind of growth of the business? How do you think about your succession? What goes through your head in terms of a business planning perspective?
Well, I guess this is sort of related to that question, the point that I made just a minute ago is, you know, I want my law firm to live after I'm gone. I have employees who I value greatly, and I want them always to have a job. So I have to get my law firm to a certain size so that it can be, you know, self-sustaining even without me. So, you know, that's about systems and processes and making sure we always do everything correctly the same way every time, and making sure I have a team who does that. And that includes the marketing. So an estate planning firm unlike a financial advisory, our clients aren't with us, for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. They are our clients while they do the estate plan, and then they go away and we might not see them again for 10 years, or we might not see them ever again. And then we're going to see their children when they die. So we are more transactional in that we have to be constantly bringing in new clients. And so marketing is a big part of that, and training my team to be able to do the marketing. So I'm not the only one. So what you're talking about, Mike, you see us doing our live stream podcast. Our podcast is done as a live stream. And so you'll see that on LinkedIn, and you'll see it on Facebook. You can see it on our website too. Mm-hmm. But
so I have a question about the
Sure.
finding people that kind of finding the right clients, right? Are there ways that I've been thinking about copywriting a lot lately, and it's like asking people to ask questions to themselves to be like, oh, I might need an estate planner, right? And so I'm wondering, are there specific ways to have people question if they need to have an estate planner, or if now is the right time? Does that make sense?
Well, if you ask somebody like me, I say now is always the right time.
Oh, sure,
if you don't have one and you own property of any value, really, really young people, even if they don't own any property, they still need a power of attorney. They still need a healthcare director. So that is estate planning also. So I wouldn't say that there's anybody who really doesn't need it.
Yeah.
They need something.
If they're living in the US, it's probably a good idea, or any like developed country, because
if you're over the age of 18. Yeah.
You just said a healthcare directive?
A healthcare directive.
What is that?
That is it's a legal document. That's what we call it in California, an advanced healthcare directive. And in it, you name somebody who will make medical decisions for you if you are unable.
Got it.
So that's why I'm saying, even if you don't own any property, we all could, unexpectedly become incapacitated. And it's very important to have planned for that. Otherwise, your family is going to end up in probate court doing a conservatorship for you. And that is terrible, terrible process.
I've heard that those are like 10 times more expensive than just hiring an estate planning attorney for you.
Oh, so yeah. They're very, very expensive.
And probably really fast. No.
Yeah. Anything involving a court means lots of attorney's fees and a lot of time.
Oh, geez. All right. Well, let's switch the subject to something that's very fast. Let's talk about the digital world and how it might have changed business. So obviously, pandemic happened, and maybe things sped up a little bit. Maybe things slowed down. For so many people I know, it accelerated the industries. How did the digital world and the pandemic affect how you guys are doing business?
Well, obviously, we're talking to each other from 3 different locations, and that is how we very commonly do our client meetings now. Clients can come into the office and meet with us in person if they choose, but the vast majority of them are very comfortable using Zoom, and we do client meetings on Zoom. So that has expanded our geographic reach. If I can work with a client who lives in San Diego, in the before times, that client would never have talked to me because they're not going to drive to Walnut Creek to meet with me. So that's kind of nice. I think it does speed things up a little bit because, you can very quickly go from one Zoom meeting to the next one. Whereas if it's an in-person meeting, you got to clear the conference room, you got to bring people in, you got to get them a cup of coffee, that it's just a little more cumbersome doing it that way. So
that leads to the question of your staffing. This is at my face all the time. Your staffing, you're at home right now. do you have particular policies in terms of your folks working from home, working from the office? And has that evolved over the last few years?
Oh, yeah. Well, in early March 2020, we had a large office and everybody worked there all day, every day, every single one of us. Now I have 3 people who are in the office every day. The rest of us are allowed to work from home if we choose to, but that's a privilege. It's not a right, and I can yank it back if I need to. I've not had to. And we usually, the ones who are working remotely, we all come in 1 or 2 days a week anyway. So it's changed our office physical space. We were able to downsize. We have workstations rather than, I don't have an office in my office. When I come in, I sit in the bullpen with everybody else at one of the workstations, and I do my work there. So, so we rotate through. We don't have 9 computers in the office. We have, I don't know, 5. I'm making that number up, but I think it's 5.
Is there any like remote hiring that you've done, or is everybody that's based in California?
All my people are in California.
Yeah. I've heard of some people using like virtual assistants, but I suppose for your kind of level of knowledge and how the industry works, you'd need to make sure that the people are probably have a step up in terms of how the law industry works.
Yeah, I guess so. Although, I do have one of my employees as my marketing assistant. So she has never worked in the office. She's always been remote because, and so in theory, she could work in Wyoming, but she doesn't. She happens to be in California.
So I'm going to go down that electronic path because this is something that, as you know, I think about too. Is there any movement in the state of California on electronic notarizations, and kind of where do you sit on the whole notarization thing remote?
I know that there have been bills proposed. I don't know if they got any traction in the California legislature. So I'm not the person to give you up to the minute, feedback on that.
Hi, Patrick.
Patrick's behind. Sorry. That's an interesting question, Mike, about how do I feel. I think that they could probably make electronic notarization work. I don't know how it works in other states where they do it. I have a hard time imagining you can do it without actually seeing the person on video or something like that. And so I would be very reluctant to go to that unless that was built into it. But other states make it work. I think it could work, but we always have to be afraid. There are so many people who are trying to steal someone else's money through estate planning. And
you go back to that elder law issue. And
exactly.
The camera, who's in the room with mom? Kind of
thing. And so it's really hard to control that. And that's something that we have to control in our office. If an elderly client comes in, we have to say, no family members, you go wait in your car. We've got to go through this alone with your mom. And, doing it electronically, it is a concern. I don't know how you get around that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is inside baseball with Ryan and me, Kirsten. When we look at the questions and see who's better off asking them, and Ryan gave me one that, and I'd like to know, I'd like to believe I know what this is, but I've never heard of it. What is that? What's it called? A Hagestad provision?
It's the way I pronounce it is Hegstad. So Hegstad is a family. When you hear these things in the legal profession, it usually means that that's the person who litigated it all the way to the top court, and now this whole concept is named after them. So that was a family. They had a trust. The grantor died, and there were assets that were not in the trust, and they didn't want to have to do a probate because that's a hassle and it's very expensive. the assets were listed on their Schedule A to their trust. And so what the attorney did is filed a petition in the court saying, look, these are trust assets. The grantor declared in writing, I'm holding these assets in trust. He didn't happen to go through the procedure of transferring ownership, but that was the intention, and let's honor that. And the court said, yep, you're right. So a Hagstad petition now is a way that we avoid probate when we can, for assets that really should have gone into the trust because they're listed right there, but nobody got around to doing that. And sometimes it's because the grantor dies very suddenly. You know, we do estate planning for people who are very, very ill, and sometimes they sign the documents and the next day they're gone.
Wow.
And they haven't retitled all their bank accounts.
So what types of things? Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I'm curious about legacy planning. It sounds like this is, well, legacy makes me think, oh, it's long term, like this is who gets the assets. That's kind of almost a central part of the estate planning process, right? Or is it slightly different at all?
Well, legacy can mean a variety of things. It kind of depends on what your intention is, but to some people, legacy means transferring down to your family your values and not just your money. Because legacy can mean, you know, what people think of you when you're gone, you know, what you leave behind, the mark you leave on the world. So, and that can, I think that when a lot of times clients want to do some charitable giving, that's part of that. You know, I want people to remember me as a generous person who supported this particular cause.
Yeah. Another question I have about this wasn't on the question sheet, but this just popped up in my head after we were talking about Elvis and the Vanderbilts. A famous singer. What?
Sounds like a rock group, Elvis and the Vanderbilts.
Yeah. Well, this different rock group that I'm talking about, and arguably not rock, but a famous singer. She was just taken out of conservatorship or something like this. Is conservatorship part of estate planning at all?
I wouldn't say it's part of estate planning, but oftentimes estate planners do conservatorships.
Yeah.
Most estate planners that I know of prefer not to be involved in anything adversarial.
Oh.
We are, you know, wimpy pacifists. We don't want to fight. We just want to plan it out for you. And if it turns into a fight, we're going to hand you off to one of our litigator colleagues. Conservatorships can go smoothly and without any adversarial proceedings. They can. Oftentimes there is some, you know, fighting in a conservatorship. So
and what in general it means that somebody other than the person has control over their assets and all their choices or something like that.
Yes, there's two kinds of conservatorships. One is a conservatorship of the person, and the other is a conservatorship of the estate. So the person who has conservatorship over your estate, they control your assets. And conservatorship over your person, they control all the decision making that you might make. You know, what doctor are you going to go to? They might even control whether you get married or where you live, which you can understand that somebody who isn't totally incapacitated would resist that, would not be happy with that.
I guess that's where the arguments come from, right? And then crowds that you know they start petitioning and things like that. And then the Netflix documentaries about it, right? This was Britney Spears.
In case anybody didn't put that
you didn't pick this one up. I guess it didn't.
Yeah.
We got one more question, and then Dad has another question, and then we'll go to the final four.
Okay.
First, mine is about power of attorney, and it sounds like this is a pretty important thing if you are incapacitated, or what is the importance of power of attorney?
Well, we all have all kinds of things that we do every day, legal and financial things. You know, we access our money. We use our credit cards. that's the financial side, but there's all kinds of things that we do every day. You know, I have PG&E at my house. I have Comcast. And if I needed to call them and complain about something or change something, only I can do that because my name is on the account. So having a power of attorney enables just all kinds of things to be handled for you if you become incapacitated. And the reason that it's important, because there's almost always a workaround in the law. If you haven't done planning, there is a plan, and the plan is a conservatorship, which takes a very long time. It's very expensive, but somebody will be able to step in and handle all that stuff for you. The power of attorney enables you and your family to avoid that.
Let's see.
So I had an experience 10 years ago now, and I'm fascinated with how many times you've had experience where the family does the right thing. They do a durable power for healthcare. They bring it to the hospital when the elderly parent is at the health, and it says, look, if I'm turning into a vegetable, go ahead and pull the plug. And getting the hospital to actually do that was incredibly difficult because it's, you know, you make that decision and you go wrong, there's no coming back. So I'm curious, Kirsten, if you've had experiences where even with a properly written durable power of attorney for healthcare, the medical community doesn't react correctly to it.
Okay. That is an excellent question, and it really illustrates something that I think is important that people understand. So I've not had any clients with, and I have no personal experience with a healthcare directive not being honored by the medical profession. They come in with the healthcare directive and they say, look, I'm the person who's supposed to make decisions here. My experience through my clients has been that they are happy. They are very happy that you have a healthcare directive and that there's someone they can turn to for decision making. They don't reject them. But the situation you're describing, that's a very unique situation, because whether or not to pull the plug is not something that the family unilaterally decides. The hospital, the medical people, they are involved in that because it's a medical decision. And so some people are candidates for that and some people just medically are not going to be. So you don't get to just decide in a vacuum, even if you have the perfect healthcare directive. That's what I would say. And because people do kind of come in with this idea that, oh, if I give my daughter my healthcare directive, she's going to pull the plug. No, a doctor's not going to let her do that unless it's medically indicated.
So there's other opinions in play in this case.
That is a really useful comment because that's not the way it's presented in many cases. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, that it's always in the context of medical care. And so the person with the power doesn't get to do whatever they want.
Gotcha.
All right, we're going to go to the final 4 questions. First one is talking about tools, and we're wondering, are there specific tools that you use in your business that you just love using?
I have a few. I don't know how many you want to hear about.
1 or 2.
Okay, so all estate planners, we use software to help us with our drafting, and my drafting software is called Wealth Docs. It's provided by a company called Wealth Counsel, and I think it is absolutely hands down the best in the industry. So I love my Wealth Docs. The other one that we use all day, every day is Clio, which is a practice management software specifically for law firms, and we love it, and they keep improving it and they keep adding things that make us happier and happier all the time.
So you said health docs, or what was the first
Wealth
doc?
Docs.
Okay.
Yeah.
DOX or DOC?
I think they spell it DOCX.
Okay. And then Clio, CLIO?
CLIO, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure we get these down. Next question. I like to learn about like books or articles or podcasts, media people are listening to or reading, consuming that have kind of shaped their opinions or guided their thinking. Does anything stick out in the last 6 months?
In the last 6 months. Well, I just recently reread the E-Myth Revisited,
Oh yeah.
and it was like a refresher. I think it's something that I need to look at every 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was talking about earlier. You have to have systems, you have to be able to have the company do without you if they have to. And that's what the E-Myth is all about.
Set up the documentation. There's another one that we always, well, we like a lot. It's called Work the System. I think it rhymes with that. It rhymes with the E-Myth.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is a great one. What are your favorite things to do outside of work?
Oh, okay. So I'm a camper and a hiker. I have in the not too distant past, and I will again in the future, led service trips for the Sierra Club. So that means I take a group of people out into a wilderness area for a week, and we're backpacking and we're building trails or repairing trails or doing whatever the Forest Service needs us to do. So that I really enjoy. And hiking. The other thing that I have a few things, and they're all weird and quirky, but a kind of more mainstream thing is I really love stand-up comedy. So
really?
Yeah.
Who are your favorite comedians?
Oh, my comedians tend to be very old school people who I have followed for many years. Like Jake Johansson, he's one of my favorites. Dana Gould. Now, these are all people who are, approximately my age because I've been following them forever.
Do they have Netflix specials?
I don't believe
hear them.
I don't think either of them. They both have podcasts. Every comedian now has a podcast.
Yeah. I feel like Oh, here you're a comedian now. Here's your podcast.
I know. But speaking of podcasts, I mean, there are so many funny ones, not even by technically comedians or not stand-up, like the podcast. I'm not going to remember the name, but the three guys, Will Arnett.
Oh, with
Jason Bateman.
Yeah. I know. I don't know the name, but I've heard of it. And those guys know each other really well.
It's something like Smart Less. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting. So many people we've interviewed on this love hiking outside. And I'm always like, have you been to Muir Woods? And they're like, yeah, I love Muir Woods. We got to do like a podcast meetup, hiking meetup. Everybody would definitely go.
Yeah. Well, hiking is a great activity.
I think the pandemic really reminded like getting outside and like breathing the fresh air is a really just good way to think, Not enough people do that. So it's really good to see that people love hiking. How can people find you?
Our website is absolutetrustcounsel.com. You can call us 925-943-2740. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter.
Okay.
All those places.
We will link to all those.
Yeah.
We'll link to all those. Okay. Well, Kirsten Howe, we appreciate you coming on. It was good to see Patrick as well. He's not here at the end. Where is he?
I don't know. I don't know. He's looking out the window somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. He's just.
There are birds to watch.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, we appreciate your time. And we'll get this up. It'll be up by next Wednesday. And at that point,